Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone, and it's caught! Jelani Woods! Touchdown! INDY!
A 43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton.
How do you like that, partner?
Galloway drives all the way to the hole, throws it up, got it! Indiana's got their first lead of this contest.
I mean, that's a goddamn Emmy winner right there.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio coming to you here on this Wednesday, July 12th. Thank you so much for being along with us, no matter how you're listening, whether you're on radio, YouTube, or podcast. Appreciate everybody joining us along. Of course, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, powered by Andy Moore Honda. Just go to andymoorehonda.com to get more to your door. And Endeavor Hospitality and the family of restaurants in and around the Bloomington area. Great places like BB's Market or the new Chop Shop Steakhouse located right next door. Make sure you stop in and give them a visit. Welcome in. Another great day planned. Of course, Neddenriep will be with us, the great Rick Bozich. And we are fortunate to have JD Campbell with us once again, who just returning from Las Vegas for the visit to the NBA Summer League. All kinds of great stories, it sounds like, coming out of there. JD, how are you, first of all?
I'm doing great. Like I say, we left last Thursday morning and spent up until Monday late afternoon there and got a chance to run into a lot of IU people. But for me, it was more getting the chance to and experience something that I had never had. And I think the NBA Summer League is certainly unique. I certainly believe if you're going to go, you should go the first 4 days because it looks like guys are starting to pull out or whatever. But it was a good opportunity and a good experience to see. It seems like everybody in the NBA is out there, coaches, players. They come and they're into being seen, as long as it's not with Britney Spears.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, a ton going on out there. We were talking in the break, and some of the names JD brought up, I'm like, oh, my gosh, wow. Some of them I would never have thought of. We've got plenty to cover there, and the Major League All-Star game last night as well. But out in Las Vegas, just the IU presence is mind-boggling. But in the break, we were talking about something that you brought up that I forget who I've talked to that both of us have. We were like, I would love to see a list of just the IU managers from the years that have gone on to become whatever they're doing. Obviously, they're the obvious ones like Dusty May, guys like that, LJ Wright, Scott Dolson come to mind. But there are so many that it's almost it's impossible for me to keep up with. But I wish someone could compile a list of where these guys have gone and done, because there's just so many success stories just from managers.
Well, that was one of the great things. Friday night, I got a chance after the Lakers Golden State game to run into Will Sheehy, who's helping out with Golden State, and Steph Cooper, who was part of Coach Crean's staff during our great run from 11 to 13. And he's gone on, and he's the head coach of the Santa Cruz G League team. And Will, being the great guy that he is, said, hey, why don't you come we're having a dinner Sunday night after our game. Why don't you come by? And I said, sure. And he said, some of the guys, some of the managers, people we're going to meet. And I had a chance and there were 8 of us there. I was the 8th wheel, and actually went to a Japanese restaurant, which was so out of character for me. Based on what I do when I'm home. But I was there with, Brendan Yu, Tim Dather, Jacob Mualam, Brendan, Steve Cly, Devin. Devin was with us, and Seth and Devin Blair, and then Seth and and Will came over after their game. They had a 7:00 game that night. But the interesting thing was that, walked in the hotel. It was at the Cosmo, and walking through the hotel, and about the first 100 feet that I'm in, I see Jeremiah Rivers. And I haven't seen Jeremiah since he left, and had a nice talk with him. And we go have dinner. Then I'm walking out to go back to the hotel, and Armand Franklin grabbed me. And, he made the effort to see me. He saw me and came over, and had a real nice conversation with him, talking to him, seeing how all of that, everything was going on, and in his career, how it was at Virginia, what was the differences between playing in the ACC and the Big Ten. And so you just ran into a lot of people. Another person I ran into back in the locker room area was George David, assistant general manager with the Pistons. George is another manager that came through the system. So it's really deep. Those guys are impressive. And I sit there and I look at those guys, and I remember when they were all freshmen starting off, and you just think, man, good for them. They're getting a chance to live their dream, and they worked hard. And just good for them that they're able to do what they want to do in life, and they just keep plugging away. They just keep moving up.
I think you could write a book just on the managers of Indiana basketball, and I'm talking about going back to Bob Knight, because I'd love to know where some of these guys are that we don't know. But there are guys like L.J. Wright, who I went to high school with, who was a manager with Scott Dolson, who's the head of all men's championships for the NCAA. But then most of them are spread throughout the NBA in different roles. There's so many guys in roles that we don't know, that a lot of us don't know. But it's amazing. It is a long, long list. I cannot imagine any other program producing more successful managers than Indiana has.
Well, and again, another guy that I ran into is our head senior manager this year, Grayson Medina. He came out with his mom and his grandma, and he came up to where we were sitting in the media section and got a chance to talk to him. Then I sent him to one of my places in town to eat, and he seemed to enjoy it. But you look at the managers right now. Even Adam Howard is a guy who they mentioned does a great job of trying to collect names and all that. And right now on Mike's staff, he's got two former managers. Nick Verdon is one, Adam is another, and Jason Gandhi is a former manager who works over in athletics right now that I had a chance to teach in my class. But they're so solid. I mean, they're just all they work hard. They know what they have to do, and you couldn't ask for anyone to be more prepared than those guys.
Yeah, and people, I don't know if people realize how hard they work. I mean, they work almost as hard as the players, maybe not as physically, but the time demands are the same. If the players are there, they're there. As a matter of fact, a lot of times they're there when the players aren't there to do things.
No question. Yeah, the time demands for those guys can be incredible. I mean, it can be, they could be breaking down film. They could be. My favorite thing is always to watch them when we get somewhere and they've got to put the tape down on the carpet in the meeting room to mimic a court or something like that. That's always. I mean, they do. They just get after it, and we've been very fortunate. I know during my 16 years, just a lot of great kids and a lot of people that are very successful and going on. A number of them are, college basketball, are trying to get into coaching there. A lot of success with people in the NBA. And, it was fun to sit down with them and listen to some of their stories because, man, it's just fun to see young people get an opportunity to chase their dream. And right now they're all within, 2 to 10 years of experience in their profession, starting off as interns, and they're crushing it right now.
Well, I mean, how many programs can say they have produced a manager that was an NBA head coach, Lawrence Frank, and went on to do other things? Then you've got Dusty May, who has been to a Final Four. You could stop right there. I don't know that there's any program in the country that can just say that, much less the multitude of other things that these guys have successfully accomplished.
Well, again, it's a great testament to all the people who have mentored all the managers over the years. Coach Knight obviously saw importance in it. That's carried on. It's a very prestigious thing to be a part of the program. And I think more than anything else, just a tremendous pride and dedication. And they know they have to put in a lot of time, and they do willingly. And those kids are if ultimately your goal is to want to get into professional or college basketball, then they've certainly done that and been a great representatives for the IU basketball program.
And being a manager of a sports team used to just be get the water, to do this, make sure the balls are out, yada yada. But it changed. Was it Bob Knight that changed it at Indiana, that started the importance of that, or where these guys were learning so much more? I don't know that it was before that, but did he consciously cultivate that?
Well, I wouldn't know, because that's well before my time. But what I can talk about now is, a lot of managers, many have to participate on scout teams. Do some scout stuff. And they also, some are helping any way they can to every process you need, whether it's scouting, it's just amazing to see how much experience they do get. They just don't stand around and take up space. So they're constantly involved, monitoring. One thing that I think is really good, because statistics are in my wheelhouse, but statting every scrimmage and doing all of that and compiling and providing reports right after practice manually. Whereas, for games, we have computer programs and it pops out right away, but they do. And they're all over everything. They're all over everything.
They have their individual studies of school, but this is a study of in itself. I mean, this is a degree in and of itself, it seems.
Well, it is. And one guy that I mentored, Nate Weekers, started off as a manager for Dan Dockich. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, he was a manager, and he came up to me because I did football and basketball there. He came up to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to get some experience." I said, "Okay." So what his job was to do for me was work home football games. And this was before the technology was getting, too intense. But he would sit on the phone and dictate play-by-play to ESPN so they could put it up on their game tracker and stuff like that. And when he left Bowling Green, he went to Villanova for a year, and then I got the job, and I brought him to work with me. And then now he has been at Arizona a few years after being with me, maybe my first 11, 12 years. The funny thing about that is he arrived, he had 12 former players in the summer league. So he flew in Monday as I was flying out to talk with his guys. And we were very close and keep in touch, and very proud of him, as I am all the kids, and I call them kids now, but everyone who we've come up and worked with and had them advance to where they want to go. And so, yeah, I mean, I think Dan probably mimicked a lot of what was going on in Indiana, and his managers, 2 or 3 of them are involved in media relations, actually. So that's something to be really proud of.
Absolutely. We've got to take a break. JD Campbell is with us. Kyle Neddenriep will join, and Rick Bozich as well later on. We've got more coming up. We'll be back with it right after this.
We'll be right back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the market.
Don't. Oh, Baba. Where's my glasses? Oh, here we go. How's Dino doing?
He was good. You know, he was good. It's just such a whirlwind. I'd be happy to talk about, if you want to talk about what's it like going to that and giving you, two gyms connected to another. I mean, two arenas connected to each other, so you've got
So which ones are they?
Thomas and Mack and the Cox Pavilion.
Oh, they have an arena in the Cox Pavilion?
Yeah. That's where the women play. And it's interesting. I got to talk to Mike Bray. He was coaching the Hawks and ran into him.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Is he in their organization now?
Yeah. But very laid back. I can give you some of my thoughts. And the other thing, Jim, that we can talk about after we, talk about Jalen, Trace and Race and everything, is the number of guys that we've played against at IU that were in the G League. Bryce McGowan's, Malachi Branham, Cole Swider, Max Christie. I mean, just being able to see guys that you saw up close as players and see how their game's evolving. It's very different. Again, it's such a laid back environment. It's guys are desperate. Guys are playing hard to try to get, invited to training camp and get spots on teams. And it's just a unique
10 seconds, guys.
Just a unique experience.
This is Brewing, Metalworks Brewing Company. Bring your passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by Southern Stone Restaurant. Now back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. Wednesday, July 12th here at Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thanks a lot for joining us. We're fortunate to have JD Campbell with us. JD just returning from Las Vegas, site of the NBA Summer League, where a plethora of players, whether involved with Indiana, the Big Ten, managers. It's just mind-boggling how deep the list we could go off of in just short directions. But and the Summer League itself is such a unique event because there's no other sport that has this compact opportunity, I guess you would call it, for all these guys who are. And you mentioned earlier, they're all desperate. They're looking for a spot on a team. They're trying to knock somebody out or try to secure their own spot. But the guys that, whether they're through Indiana or through guys that you've played against that you mentioned, that list is just long.
Well, it was interesting. The first game that I got to go to, we got there about halftime of the San Antonio game, which was completely sold out. A 20,000 seat arena or however many tickets they sold. And you're watching and I'm like, oh, that's Malachi Branham there. Oh, that's Bryce McGowan's over there. Guys that we went through in every game, watching the Lakers. Max Christie had a big game Friday night, and another guy that I didn't view as an NBA guy, but Cole Swider from Syracuse. I remember we played him. And so I just thought, if you're a fan of college basketball, this is a neat event to go to. You could spend all day, you got two arenas connected. And so you can go over to the Cox Pavilion, which is the home of the women's basketball team there, or you could stay in the Thomas and Mack. And I started going to the Thomas and Mack when I was 20 years old, when it opened, 21 years old. And for me, it's like, it was always packed when I came in here, when UNLV was at its heyday, and now they're averaging about 5,000 a game. But it was actually almost in the same seats I used to sit in when I was a college student, coming home at break. And it was a great atmosphere. I didn't get to watch anything in the Cox Pavilion, but I did get a chance to see, such a laid back environment, like coaches coming over. I ran into Mike Bray and had a chance to talk to him and congratulate him on a great career and how much we enjoyed, battling each other and talked about some mutual friends. And, but I think if you're a basketball junkie, it's something that's worthwhile going to or taking your kids to. And in addition to being in Las Vegas, which has just exploded. Now here's something for you, Jim. I didn't know what the population was of Las Vegas. And when I grew up there, when I graduated from high school, the population was about 500,000. Okay.
Well over 1 million now.
It's 2.9 million.
Gee whiz.
And I'm like, wow. Now it felt like 2.4 million were driving their cars around the strip as I was trying to get through things. That was the only, again, I learned to drive actually there because I had a delivery. I was a medical delivery kid, and I would drive to hospitals and doctors' offices. So I learned to drive through the heyday. I had to drive on the strip, and I had to do everything when I was 16 years old. And two things come to mind when I think of Las Vegas. One, they have the widest roads anywhere I've ever been. I mean, like in residential areas, the roads are wide. The second thing, they have the worst stoplights that I've ever experienced. And you try so hard to not get hit at a stoplight, like, oh man, I'm going to be 5 minutes. I can check my mail. I can do everything I can because I'm going to be here 5 minutes. But it was a lot of fun. It's always fun to go home. Saw a lot of people. Really enjoyed getting a chance to watch Jalen play. I thought he was outstanding. I think, he played the first two games in California. Then they started on Friday. And I think one of the things that I read is that they really wanted him to focus more on distributing and passing rather than looking for a shot. And he did that in that first game where they beat the Warriors. And then the second game when they played the Hornets, he had a much bigger game. I think he had 15 or 17 points. He did a great job. But he looked he looked like he belonged. That's the thing. That's what you look at in these guys. My strategy take of watching all the teams play, to me, I thought I saw it. It's like they're not running plays. They're either running a high-low pick and roll or they're drive and kick. And guys get off threes a lot quicker at that professional level, I think, than they do in college. I didn't see any shot fakes. You know how many times we'd see a guy, Miller Kopp comes to mind. Miller, shoot the ball. He does a shot fake and then passes it. In that league, in this environment, those guys are putting the ball up. And I thought that was unique. And then Got a chance to talk to Trace after the Golden State Laker game, and he's doing great. And he came up and hugged Jalen. And like I say, man, they're in the business now. I mean, they're hopefully Trace will get a chance to play here either in their next game. I don't know if it's tonight or tomorrow, but I think he's working hard to try and get back to get that. But it was, it was interesting to watch because, the one thing that you never saw from anybody was bad body language. Those guys know that the eyes, I mean, you're looking, the general managers, Mitch Kupchak for the Hornets, I saw, Rob Pelinka for the Lakers, and all these people, big Steph Curry, big name players are out there. And so you're really trying to make an impression. So there's no time for bad body language. It was interesting to see. I think one game before we got there came down to a buzzer beater. But for the most part, guys are getting their minutes in, showing what they can do, fulfilling their role, taking what's given to them. And again, the fans, they were into it. The fans were into it. And both arenas, you struggled to find a seat if you were a fan, especially if San Antonio was involved.
Yeah, and Las Vegas is just a great place. We mentioned Dean Garrett earlier. And I don't know, you may or may not know this. Last year when we were out there for the Indiana game, that's Dean and his father and Dean's Race Thompson and Race's father, rather.
Yeah.
Dean and Race's dad were in Minneapolis at the same time, and they did a sports show together.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But, that's the kind of thing that is so common. And that's the great, for me, I think what I enjoyed the most about the experience was spending time and seeing people that had been part of the Indiana program when I was there. Riley Crean, Tom's son, was with the Dallas Mavericks. I didn't get a chance to see him. Like I say, Al Durham reached out to me. I didn't, Al's living out there. He's training out there. And they had a convention called NBA Con. And I believe he was selling some of his merchandise, which unfortunately with the NIL, coming up later after his career, I think he would have had a real good time selling that merchandise when he was in Indiana, but his real is rare brand. So he reached out, and then I saw some pictures of Thomas. I wish I would have been able to see him, but it's constant, man. There are so many people. That is the place to be in the NBA, which is unique in terms of that. For any other sport, nobody else has anything. It's like, could you imagine spring training with all 30 MLB teams and, a league and the number of people there? But, it is the NBA, everybody ascends onto Las Vegas. And they also talked about, they announced an in-season tournament next year in November, December, where the NBA teams are going to play for the NBA Cup early in the regular season. So, and certainly, cool. And when you look at the population numbers, I don't think there's any question that Las Vegas and Seattle will be the teams that get the most consideration for an expansion franchise coming up here in the next few years.
Well, there's no city even close to doing what Las Vegas has done over the last few years. First of all, they were not allowed by the professional leagues, by NCAA. Nobody wanted a part of Las Vegas because of being afraid of gambling and all that. And now that's out the window with all the apps and sponsorships. And Las Vegas has, you just mentioned, that they have exploded. They were already exploding just from a population. I remember I used to work in the media department for the National Finals Rodeo every year, which has been in Las Vegas since 1985, and it exploded. the NFR exploded from that point forward. It used to just be this old country boy kind of rodeo thing in Oklahoma City. No, not anymore, man. That thing goes to Vegas, and it is big time. And of course, during that period in Las Vegas, all you see are cowboy hats. But it is a huge event as well. And Las Vegas is just everything that they get, they turn into gold.
Well, it's interesting because I can tell you about that time when the National Finals Rodeo came. That was in my college days. And we found it funny, those of us who lived there, because on the Strip, you're used to having certain people play the Strip. You have a Sinatra, Dean Martin, all these guys, and the usual Vegas types. And then when the National Finals Rodeo came, they were gone, and every country music star in America, somebody took over Caesar's Palace, somebody took over the Desert Inn, somebody took over the Riviera, the Trop, all these different things. And it is an economic boom. I mean, December was always a dead month for Las Vegas. It was like the one month that people are like, oh, it's going to be slow and this and that. And with the NFR, it completely changed. My experience, growing up there was from maybe December 10th through Christmas Day, it was dead. And then what I remember more than anything was Christmas night, you started to see an influx of fans. And usually they were fans of the Big Ten team playing in the Rose Bowl. So I get there, Christmas night or day after, heading up to New Year's, because New Year's is huge there. A lot of Iowa fans. I remember seeing a lot of Hawkeye fans coming to Las Vegas on their way to Pasadena, and that was something. But to your point about the NBA, back when I was in college, the Utah Jazz actually played 8 games a year, 20% of their home schedule, because Utah at the time was not, successful. They had just drafted John Stockton, and they hadn't drafted Malone yet. But a lot of people don't know that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar actually set the NBA scoring record all time in the Thomas and Mack Arena when the Lakers were hosting the Jazz back then. So I got to see, I think I went and saw Houston and the Jazz play one time. But, the NBA has had a flirtatious event. This is the 18th year of the Summer League, and it's just, I'm just telling you, it's incredible to see what happens in that town. And on top of that, this past weekend, there was a big UFC fight. I don't follow UFC. I don't know anything about it. I just know that everywhere you moved, it's just people everywhere. And they do events now. They have, I think, 5 or 6 arenas that they can hold events in. And I know during college basketball, especially the conference tournaments, they host like the Pac-12, the WAC, the West Coast, the Mountain West, the Big West. I mean, to have that many facilities, that's, they've done it right. And now they've got the best WNBA team in the Aces, the defending world champions. They've got the Golden Knights, which is absolutely ridiculously taking over that city. And now the university is hoping to rebound and get momentum back after years and years of, deterioration of their fan base. When there were 500,000 people living in Las Vegas, they sold out 20,000 tickets every night at UNLV. It was the toughest ticket to get. Now, hopefully, both in football, playing in Allegiant Stadium, and in basketball, they're hoping to rebound and get their fans going on a much more regular basis.
You can pop that in there, John. We've got there you go. There's Race Thompson and his dad on the left. Dean Garrett, of course, in the middle. But yeah, he was, for those of you who don't know, Race's dad was for Minnesota and for the Vikings. And then, of course, Dean was with the Timberwolves back then. So I learned that back. That was back when we were in Las Vegas last year. But it's amazing to me that the stories that all tie together. But and in Las Vegas, of course, they become the sports capital of the USA. It seems like.
It's, again, that's why it's one of the options that I'm looking at as far as what do I want to do. Is there somewhere I can hook on? I'm not saying necessarily with a team, but could I get involved in some kind of events or different things? And obviously the advantage to living in Las Vegas is the no state taxes, and that's really good. But they've got it going on. I'm a little surprised, but then again, maybe I'm not. I always thought Las Vegas would be a great town to have spring training in. That you could get a lot done or have kind of a fall league, but they seem to be doing pretty well, and with the Raiders there now. And what I found when I went out one time when the Raiders were playing, the number of visiting fans from the team that they're playing that week, they circle that calendar and they like to come out and have a good time. And again, just you walk through a casino, man, you can't even move. It's amazing. I was Sunday night at 9-10 o'clock, couldn't even move. And you try to stay away from things because of the traffic, but they built these places. They don't build them and they don't sit idle, that's for sure.
Absolutely. We've got to take a break. We've got J.D. Campbell with us, former Indiana University Sports Information Director. Fred mentioning Steve Alfred's out in Nevada as well. That's right.
Pat Knight.
Pat Knight
lives in Las Vegas as well. So
scouting for the Pacers. Yeah, I was fortunate. I had him and Dean Garrett on the postgame show when we were out there in Las Vegas last year, which I think that was the first media that Pat Knight has done, IU media, since his father was let go here. But very, very cool to see him. He's very, very gracious. But we got to take a break. We've got lots more coming up. J.D. Campbell's with us. Kyle Neddenriep will join us later. Rick Bozich as well. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Whether it's at...
I didn't hear you, JD.
Oh, did you want to get into the All-Star game a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
That I didn't get to watch?
Yes. There was a massive home run that was, and there was a massive home run that was not.
Which one is that?
Well, they had to go to a review for, I can't remember who hit it. It was an American leaguer, but it ended up being called foul.
Wow.
But
yeah.
He had already circled the bases. And then Elias hit that 2-run crusher. No red. There were hardly any reds in the.
Did a red even get to play?
I was looking, and I think that one pitcher maybe, but the hats were hard to tell because there were these green hats, and I'm like trying to stare at the logos.
And we can talk about this because this is all fun stuff. I would tell you that I would prefer the league uniforms be on. Diaz pitched. Thank you, Andrew. I would say that I would prefer that they wear the league uniforms on the home run derby day and then go with the game uniforms.
Yeah.
Go with the game uniforms on Tuesday.
I agree. I always loved that. It was just a cool thing to see.
But again, I think it's all based on whatever Nike feels is best for their sales. So, it's hard to argue with that,
And I'd like to talk about, while we have you, the shift in IU basketball's, what's the way to put it, culture. Mike Woodson is kind of bringing this culture back that had kind of been poo-pooed for a while. Bringing back with Calvert Cheney, of course, the latest, but Jordan Halls and himself. I mean, that's a trilogy of different eras, but all
10 seconds.
But
Stock meals in your fridge. Order online today at thefreshfork.com. Fresh Fork is a proud partner of WOW Network. This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. It is Wednesday, July 12th. Indiana Sports Beat Radio with you as always. We appreciate you joining us. Katie Campbell, former IU Sports Information Director, with us, just returning from Las Vegas, having enjoyed the sights and sounds of. Now, were you born in Las Vegas?
Yeah, I was born at 2025 East Sahara Avenue, Women's Hospital, which is now a Hertz Rent-A-Car. And lived there from 1963 through 86, which is when I graduated from college and got married. And I grew up age 4 through 9 just down the street from the Stratosphere on St. Louis Avenue. And then I moved across the interstate on the northwest side and went to Western High School. And it's great for me because I have a rule, and anybody ever wants to know where to go eat, I only eat at places that were established before 1986. I do not eat I even blow off In-N-Out Burger. I will not eat anywhere. And so my son and I got there, and when I told some of the guys, because usually I have a group of high school teammates and coaches that we get together, eating at the local bars is where you should eat. If you find out what are some of the best bars, a lot of the bars are themed for NFL teams. Every NFL team has a bar there in town. And so if you're a fan of an NFL team, I go to a Cleveland Browns bar for Italian food called the Tap House on West Charleston. That's always a stop. The bar that's in my neighborhood, the Four Kegs,
that's going to be a spot for Jeff Keg to go then.
Well, but that was Guy Fieri worked there when he was in college, so he obviously put that on his show, and I'll get the same thing every time. The steakhouse I go to is the Golden Steer, opened up in 1957. Took my son everywhere, but the place that I went to for the first time that I really loved, and I've been wanting to go many, many years, opened in 1972, called the Pepper Mill. It's a diner type, but it's a diner type where I'm sitting there eating my French toast, and a cocktail waitress comes by. Would you like anything to drink? And I'm thinking, yeah, what would I eat with my French toast? And again, the reason I don't go to many of the new places, and I did go to this place in the Cosmopolitan that was new. The reason why I don't go is simply because it brings back the feelings of the family that I got to spend time with growing up and miss dearly. The first thing I do when I land is I go to the grocery store and I grab 4 things of flowers, and I drive out to the cemetery where my mother and my grandma and grandpa and uncle and great-grandmother buried, and I put flowers on their grave, and then I turn the corner and go to another old school place called Jerry's Nugget, which is not in the best part of town. You know what I'm saying? Not in the best part of town. And I go to the coffee shop. I love coffee shops in those old hotels. Those were great things back in the day. But again, there's so much there. and there's a lot of new stuff, and I certainly understand people supporting all the the great restaurants. I mean, I went and visited my my late brother's best friend, and went over to his house Saturday night, and we talked. And he says, "JD, there's 100 restaurants within 2 miles of where I live, and I probably haven't been to 90% of them." You just get you get hooked up with where you like to go, and that's what I do. The only place that people may know that I go to is Del Taco. And I go to Del Taco to get 3 tacos because they used to be Noggles, a fast food chain. And anybody who's grown up in Southern California or Las Vegas, they know Noggles. And so that's the only reason why I go, is because they have the same menu and Del Taco bought them out. So I'm very picky with what I do out there, but it's all sentimental based. Winchell's Donuts, everything I do out there is all sentimental, and I have it all mapped out. I have it mapped out who I meet with. Monday, I met with. They're my brothers, basically. Charlie is. I have an older brother, Charlie Miller, who's 2 years older than me, and a younger brother, Mike, who's 1 year younger than me. Now we're cousins, but we all grew up in the same house together. And so I always have that where I meet with the cousins, I meet with my teammates, and then there are a few other guys that I meet. But it's always a great time. And if you ever go out there, you can get a hold of me. You see my emails, jdcamsfirst@gmail.com. I'm always sending people out to the old school place, Batista's Hole in the Wall, Italian place. It's got that great mob feel to it. And it's right behind the Flamingo, across from what is now Horseshoe. But that's just what I do when I go home. I stay at the Palms, and because I can turn left and go to my neighborhoods, turn right, go to the Strip. I don't stay on the Strip and get caught up in the traffic. But, I've only stayed in 2 hotels in my life there, the MGM and the Palms. And so, because usually I'm staying with family, but I had a great time.
Quick question for Bandrew. I don't think you're much of a gambler, but best craps table in Vegas?
You know what? I've been going back every year. Always, going back. And since 2018, I have not gambled 1 cent, either in the sports book or I used to love to play slot machines. My aunt used to work at a place called Silver City. And every year for Christmas on the 26th or 27th, I would go in when she worked the night shift. And I would go in and see her, and she would say, "Go play that one." And I would go play a slot machine. Within three times of putting the quarters in, I always got like 60 or 70 bucks a jackpot. That was my Christmas present every year. How she knew? She was a cashier, change lady. Always did that. And now looks like Fred talks about staying at Vegas World. I think Vegas World is now the Stratosphere, but yes, it was right on the corner of Bob Stupak's. Actually worked there one night as a dishwasher, and that told me I needed to go back to college and get my degree, because that was a brutal job in the coffee shop. But yeah, it's all kinds of stuff, and there are things that I can sit and look at and say that this is the same as it was in 1969. And then there are things that I'm completely blown away by, but yeah, as far as gambling goes, man, I don't, when we were at the Bahamas a couple of years ago with the team, and, you have to walk through the casino to get to the arena. And I would see somebody and they were looking like they were ready to gamble. I said, "Just give me half your money and I'll save you everything, because you're going to lose. There's no question about it. They don't stay open to make money. They make money all the time, and they don't stay open to lose money." So
as I always say, they don't build those beautiful places on winners.
No, and I'm sure some of your cowboy friends came back little lighter in the wallet.
They're the gambling. That is the most gamblingest group that you will ever be around. Every one of those guys gamble. I mean, they're all bam, at the tables, at the card tables, at the dice tables. They love to gamble. It's part of it.
And I don't even like to gamble when again, I've been to the casinos here in Indiana, I've been in Kansas and Ohio. It's like, I don't even like to gamble there because I feel like, well, if you're going to gamble, you gamble in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And it was, it's just not something that I get involved with. But then again, I've got buddies that they're still betting games all the time. Like I met one group of friends a few years ago at the Palace Station, and it was 10 a.m. in the morning, and the guy's drinking Heinekens already. And I'm like, man, you need help. But they, I mean, again, that's part of, just as, everybody has hobbies, and for those guys, it's their hobbies, and obviously they don't get in too much trouble.
How was Vegas?
But it was, like I say, there's a lot of places you can go to.
How has Vegas shed the
what now?
There used to be a shadow over Las Vegas with the gambling and sports. There was this iron curtain, and that has dissolved itself now somehow. They have been able to get away from that. They used to not be able to host hardly anything. And now it's the opposite. They've got all these teams that are based there, everything going there, all these sporting events there. And it's takes care of itself. And we saw recently with the Alabama baseball coach and that bet being made, how quickly they snuffed that stuff out. I think that goes a long way in giving people confidence that, hey, man, they're watching this stuff.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because one of the guys that I played with in high school is one of the top odds makers out there. He sets the line and for his organization, and hotels buy the line, and that's what they go by. He asked me if I'd ever be interested in coming to work for him from a standpoint of he's looking at having, doing similar to what the company was that kind of fished this out a little bit, U.S. Integrity, in terms of, these guys, again, they're businessmen and businesswomen, and they want everything on the up and up. And so they do everything they can to fish these kind of things out. And they've been doing this for years. They know everything. You can go back and talk about the different, controversies that have happened in sports gambling, especially with college. There was an Arizona State case years ago where students from Arizona State were driving over with brown paper bags full of cash and betting on against Arizona State and things like that. They're really sharp at that. But I think when you talk about the stigma of gambling, I just think we've now reached a generational point where most reasonable, and again, whatever your take on gambling, it can be scary, no question. Gambling has been a part of our society. When you talk about lotteries, when you talk about now sports gambling popping up in every state, it's no longer something that you only did in Vegas or Reno or Atlantic City. It's everywhere. Casinos are everywhere. And so it's much more mainstream. And I think that knowing that they have the things in place that, hopefully thwart off any of the negativity that may come out in gambling. I know there was a rule when I was growing up, you couldn't bet on any of the games that were you couldn't bet on UNLV or University of Nevada. They wouldn't allow you to bet on those games. But I just think that gambling is much more mainstream. Gambling's always happened. It just was behind closed doors, and you didn't know the guys that were running things. I mean, gambling was part of things everywhere. Now it's more out in the open and it's more regulated. And I think that hopefully helps you in terms of being able to monitor and do things. And I think, like I say, you can gamble on your phone. And that's something. Again, the one thing I will tell you, every person I've ever met that's ever gambled for a bit, and I gambled when I was 16, 17 years old, bet $5 or $10 on a game or something like that. The thing that I found is if you have a knowledge, if you think you have a knowledge of sports, you think you got a leg up on everybody and you have nothing on anybody. Again, they don't stay open to lose or, to lose money. And it's just something that you just, it's fun to have a bet with your son or your wife. You're betting on, I want this team, I want that time. It's one thing in your house. It's another thing to do it as a livelihood and another thing to do it for real. And you just gotta be smart. But there's money involved, and there's obviously money from those entities when they're sponsoring things. So, they're sponsoring the leagues, and you see the Mannings, and they're the official, Caesars, or I think that's who they're with. Caesars is the official gambling partner of the NFL, and you're seeing all that, and you're just like, okay, it's wide open. I remember we went to Michigan State this year, and I saw a ribbon board banner that had one of either the MGM or Caesars up top, and I'm like, we've come full circle here, because gambling was a dirty 4-letter word for years and years and years, and now it's mainstream. They're going to have the Final Four there in 2028. So,
absolutely, we've got to take a quick break. JD Campbell with us, former SID from Indiana. Cal Neddenriep joining us next, and Rick Bozich later on as well. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the market.
Jim, could you gamble on the rodeo that was going on?
They had a fantasy thing that they started, but I would never. It would just be chalk, because there are determiners though, because who you've drawn, whether it's if you're roping, what is this a steer they've been really good on, or is this one that's been problematic? So there would be a little bit of information, but they did not have it set up to gamble on. It just wasn't mainstream enough. And it's probably still not, unless it's in certain areas, but just the fantasy, the fantasy type deal.
I was surprised to find out you could bet on summer league games. I was like, oh my, how can you get a line on that? You don't know who's playing half the time. Kevin, how you doing? Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
He's down in Gainesville now.
Yeah, the Death Star. We drove by the Death Star a couple times, Allegiant Stadium, and I'm anxious to get a chance to go in there. I hope sometime I can go there when there's an actual game. Just really excited about that. But yeah, it's I first started. I talked about the Palace Station. It was the Bingo Palace back in 1979, and I always like to go. To the cheap buffets, all of us did. And first time I ever was in a sports book was there at the Bingo Palace. And the reason why I like going in there is because they had ESPN. They had every game on. And so you'd be like, oh, wow, I can go and watch, games that I wouldn't get to normally watch on TV there. That's obviously before cable TV had hit, and you'd have that option. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I saw Danny Ainge beat Notre Dame in the 81 NCAA tournament there, where I think Kelly Tripucka hit a shot to put Notre Dame up, and then Ainge drove down the court and made a layup. That's what I remember. Half the guys were cheering when Notre Dame made the basket, and then all of a sudden they were ripping up their tickets when Ainge made the bucket there for the win.
All right, I'm going to bring us back in. Kyle should be – here he comes. Very sorry he'll be on shortly, but here he is. 20 seconds, guys.
coworkers, Feast Market and Cellar offers an extensive wine selection with a sommelier on staff to help you with your selections. Feast also provides a wide variety of cheeses, gourmet sandwiches, entrees, a coffee bar, bread, pastries, all made fresh and mouthwatering. Stop by Feast Market and Cellar today.
This segment is brought to you by Feast Market and Cellar. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Wednesday, July 12th. Thanks a lot for being with us. Greatly appreciate you. JD Campbell with us, and now joined by Kyle Neddenriep. Kyle, how are you, sir?
Doing good. How are you guys doing this morning?
Doing fine. Got JD here, just back from Vegas.
Nice.
Saw a couple Indiana guys. Obviously, Armand Franklin caught up with him, but Blake Wesley was another one that was playing and looked like he was doing pretty good. But, that's a place. And Trace, hopefully, will get a chance to play tonight or tomorrow, whenever their game is. So a lot of guys that you covered in the day are now enjoying their time out in Las Vegas in the Summer League, trying to make their case for making a living there in that league.
I enjoy watching that for that reason. I remember, Blake Wesley, didn't cover him quite as much. Did cover him though. And being up there in South Bend, but I always thought he was, when all was said and done, out of that class he was in 2021, I always thought, man, he may be the one who ends up being the NBA guy, and sure enough, he's there now. But yeah, it's funny, man. I went out to the Dizzy Pro-Am last night out at Finch Creek, and man, you talk about good for the soul. There were so many guys that I saw that I've covered over the last however many years who were playing out there, and I'm actually writing about that right now. But the guys who I covered have kids running around there in the gym, and it's like, man, I mean, it's been a while, or time passes, but you kind of, sometimes if you don't see somebody for a while, you kind of always put them in the place of like, oh, Aaron Henry. I was talking to him last night. It's like you always think of him as like, oh, the Ben Davis Aaron Henry. The guy I covered was the Ben Davis Aaron Henry, who's now, he just signed. He's playing in Japan this coming year and hoping to make it back to the NBA after an injury. But all these guys, I mean, there were so many people I caught up with last night. It's like, man, I mean, it was just so fun. I left the gym last night like, man, I'm so glad I came out here, and just not even for a story, but just to catch up with everybody. It was very enjoyable.
Now that's Kyle Guy's event, right, Kyle?
Yeah, and I didn't even talk to Kyle. He was one I talking to so many other people. I didn't get a chance to talk to Kyle. Hopefully I'll get back out there and talk to him some. But I did see him, that he was playing out there, and yeah, he's sort of organized. Man, he does so much good stuff for Indianapolis and basketball around here, man. He's just such a plugged-in guy who gives back. You just walk in there and watch the game. Doesn't even cost anything. It's kind of an old school sort of like pickup game, kind of the old school pickup game style, but it's inside, and they got a DJ in there just playing. You got 3 courts going at once, and then the main game was at 8:30, and they had Flory was playing last night, and on his team was Taylor Persons, who played at Kokomo, and I talked to Taylor a couple weeks ago, and he was looking forward to playing with Flory. So he had the Kokomo connection between those two, and of course Taylor was such a good player at Kokomo and Ball State, and he's been playing professionally. But yeah, you basically just walk in there and find a spot, and you can watch. I mean, on one court, the first court I watched last night was both Teague brothers, Devontae Smith-Rivera, Ryan Weber, who played at Roncalli and Ball State and Youngstown State, and man, just so many others too. That it was just such a blast.
You don't have that very often anymore, guys. I know in Louisville they used to have what they call the Dirt Bowl, where you'd have those kind of guys come around. And it used to be in communities, in parks, they would have this kind of stuff, and then that kind of went away. But that's awesome for people to be able to go to, fans, because that is a collection of homegrown talent, the likes you're not going to get anywhere else.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like Trayvon Blewett was there. I didn't get a chance to talk to him either, but just guys who like, man, I mean, and you hear I was watching a different court and I kept hearing Trayvon Blewett for 3. Trayvon, he's like, oh yeah, it's like automatic bucket getter, or Keelan Martin too. I mean, like, he's not from Indiana, but everybody knows who he is. Played for Indiana Elite and Butler and everything. But yeah, it's just like, it's a throwback type of a thing. They do it, I think, Tuesday nights until I think here in about 3 weeks or so. But I'm not on here being a sponsor for them, but it's like, it's sort of an old school type of, it's kind of laid back, but then the officials will tell you it's not laid back because those guys are super competitive and, looking to get calls. Some of these guys played in the NBA very recently, like Jeff Teague. So that it's a high level of competition, and these guys are out to win. And you guys, a handful of high school guys who are playing in it, like Flory, the Reynolds kid from South Bend was there last night. Dejon Hall from Tinley was playing in it last night. Those guys aren't getting the ball a whole lot, So I know it's sort of different for them. They go from their high school team where they're probably the man to you're playing with professional guys who are going to dominate the ball a little bit more. But it's a good mix of people, and there was quite a few fans out there last night. So it was fun to see.
JD, now that you're back, will you try to get out to events like that, or what are you going to be doing?
Well, I've often said that I think basketball would benefit from having the type of summer leagues that college baseball has. Now, I know in the summer for college basketball players, they're doing a lot of academic work to try to stay ahead or have a lighter load during the season. You can get some extra credits and so that way you don't have to take 15 or 18 credits during a semester and be bogged down. But I do remember there was a time where some of our players were involved. I think Tom Pritchard comes to mind. Will Sheehy comes to mind.
Yeah.
10 or 11 years ago that guys were participating in that. And I think that's, again, you can scrimmage against your own guys all you want in the summer, but I do think competition against other people is so important to your development that I would like to see that. Now, I don't think college coaches would be excited about sending their guys to Hutchinson, Kansas, or, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, if you had leagues in those areas and you had teams much like they do, with the Cape Cod League or Alaska or other, semi-pro team or, whatever you call them these days. But I think that kind of competition is just invaluable. And I do think it would help in the development of players. But again, I also understand that academics is a big part of it. And I also understand that there may be some hesitation on coaches' parts because they don't want to see guys potentially get hurt in a summer league game, and then they wouldn't have them available for the season.
Right. I remember, I think what you're talking about, JD, was the Carlos Knox, I think, was putting that on at IUPUI. I remember going to a few of those too, and Will Sheehy. I remember Matt Roth playing in that, and maybe Jordy. Some of those guys were playing in that too, and it was very similar to what this is. And these guys will tell you, like, they're out doing this anyway. Like they play in stuff where fans aren't really, they'll play in runs. I know the factory, the guys play over there, or, there's a lot of these type of kind of word of mouth games that go on that people, don't know about because they're just out there putting them together and playing. So this is a little bit more formal, kind of like that Pro-Am was back then. This is a little bit more formal where people, they announce the teams and who's playing, and then fans can come watch. But yeah, I think it's a good point. I think playing against other people and just kind of, I think it helps with your connections too outside of basketball. Just reconnecting with people, and a lot of these guys, the ball stops bouncing at some point. Eventually, a lot of these guys play into their 30s, but you're looking for a second career after that, and so just getting some connections and getting out there in the community is a good thing too. People remember your names, but may not have heard of you for a while, so that can only help you in your professional life.
Now, I'm not changing the subject. I saw a video of Anthony Richardson, the Colts quarterback, playing pickup ball somewhere the other day. Where do you know where that was?
I didn't see that. No, but yeah, I mean, it could have been the factory. I don't know for sure though. Or it could have been downtown. I'm guessing maybe it was the YMCA downtown potentially, where the maybe got hooked up with the Pacers. They play down there.
He threw down. He threw down a nice dunk. But as soon as he was doing that, and I'm watching him land, not awkward, but sometimes your momentum carries you, and I'm like, oh boy, I bet the Colts are not going to like that.
Well, it does make you wonder the kind of like JD said. I mean, the what's the benefits and the negative. I mean, if you go out like Mason Gillis was playing last night, or one of these guys who are playing college still, and something happens, but at the same time, it's like, and actually Taylor Persons kind of took a spill as he was going into the basket, and it's like, man, if something happens, he's playing for his livelihood right now, and professionally, not for college, but if you get something, some Achilles or something happens to you and sits you out for a year, that's really, you're kind of weighing the benefits and the negatives, I guess. But it can like I said, you're playing to stay in shape anyway, whether it's in front of fans or not, or whoever you're playing against. So it's kind of part of it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that's Anthony Richardson doesn't have to be playing basketball, so you do kind of. I watch that. There's another football player playing basketball. I saw, not him, but if I was a fan of that team, I'd be like, man, I hope nothing happens to him. But it's life. I mean, I would hope that people would understand these guys have lives, and you can't just be in your own sport all the time.
Well, I was at the Indianapolis 500, of course, back in May, and the pace car driver was Tyrese Halliburton. This is right before he signed this mega contract. But the whole time I'm thinking, man, I can't believe the Pacers really did this. And they're the one that set it up.
Well, yeah. I mean, and hopefully they're not going 230 miles an hour. But
he said he wanted to get up to 145. That was his goal.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, that's like driving on 465. So what's the big deal?
JD, you can speak to this. I remember last year for Kyle Guy's event going on there. I think there were a couple of IU players that were going to play in it, and then at the last minute that changed, kind of probably because of some of the things we're talking about.
Well, one of the things, in my experience in the summer league that came back to mind for me was when Chris Byers had those freshmen, barnstorming tours prior to the year. Kyle, I think you were here too. My first year with Eric Gordon and those guys, they did the freshman barnstorming tour, and I thought that was great. And what I was thinking when I'm watching with the summer league was, I know we're doing a lot of foreign trips right now in the beginning of August in college basketball, and I said, wouldn't it be cool if you had some type of college event somewhere where it was only freshmen and sophomore, first and second year players, like it is in the NBA summer league, where it's mostly rookies and first year vets. What if you could take your kids every year somewhere and get some games? Because again, I'm just a firm believer that I think you don't have the same intensity in scrimmages when you're playing somebody every day for 2 months. And I thought they've talked about having college basketball games more mainstream in the summer. I don't think it's been, certainly approved yet. And I think there's a lot of concerns about it, but I just thought, oh man, could you imagine if you could go somewhere and play first and second year guys and in your program and have that kind of thing? I mean, I just think you get better. I know the Bahamas trip. I thought the Bahamas trip was fantastic. And then back in 2014, we went to Canada and it was fantastic. So getting an opportunity to play against somebody else other than your teammates, I'm all for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the camaraderie too of being able to do that helps benefits your team. If you're together as a team, that's only gonna. I mean, you see it. I think in a lot of just the team bonding experience, being on the road together. Those sorts of things can really. I guess they could tear you apart too if you don't get along very well. But I think that it's going to tie you together more as the season gets ready. I've never been on one, but I assume that's kind of what would be the benefit, maybe a side benefit of doing something like that as well.
You're about to start getting worked into your gig to where, hey, I have to travel with some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, I'm a guy who, I haven't been to Canada or some of these places. I've been to overseas now though, so that's I do have that. Last summer we went to Ireland and Scotland for our anniversary. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I got
one of the places where I definitely want to go.
Yeah.
What is up next for you, Kyle?
I'm actually writing about that experience right now from last night, and writing on some of these guys I caught up with. Joey Brunk was one of them as well. Aaron Henry, like I said. Who else was there? Deshaun Francis, who's playing overseas now. Xavier Turner, who played at Pike back in the day. So just caught up with some of those guys and writing about. I asked him a question of what do you know now that you would go back and tell your 16, 17, 18-year-old self, 10, whatever it is years later, or however many years later it is for each one of them. So kind of interesting. And then I'll just kind of writing about what I saw last night and that. And then, we got our super team. One of our photo shoots is tonight for our football previews. And so getting some of that stuff going as well. And, trying to enjoy a little bit of the summer too. I'm trying to take off a little bit of time, but also still working.
Yeah, you keep saying that every week, but every week it's you're not taking off. You're still working.
Well, that calendar doesn't stop, so you got to try to fit it. I did take off last week, so that did help kind of recharge the batteries a bit.
And with all these guys that are in right now, the state of Indiana at least needs to come up with a TBT team.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I would agree. I'm sure these guys would be up for it too. I would assume.
And it's a perfect timing since it's the only time they can come back together. But we'll have to talk about that more. Kyle Neddenriep, thank you so much, brother. We appreciate you beyond belief.
No problem. Thanks, Jim. See you, JD.
See you, Kyle.
Kyle Neddenriep, the Indy Star. Make sure you're following him and picking up his coverage because it's the best that there is. We're back with more. JD Campbell's with us right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Is Rick not on today, John?
Yes, I'm making sure he's ready right now.
Okay, he's usually just early, just sitting there watching. So that's why
I would have told you if he wasn't going to be on. If he had told me, which he may have.
Well, sometimes stuff comes up. I get it. It's probably been a minute since you've seen Rick, then I bet, huh? Since into the season, yeah.
Yeah. He's one of the best.
He is. I was fortunate to grow up in southern Indiana where he was.
I remember Rick when I first started.
Hey, there he is.
Hi, JD.
Got a surprise for Ricky.
Hey, man.
I remember reading Rick early in his career when I would get my subscription to Basketball Times.
Oh, wow.
And so he was one of the guys that I really enjoyed following year to year. So, and
Rick is the only sports columnist I've ever seen that, now he'll disagree with this, but he just didn't piss people off. Not to the degree that most do, and most try to do it to a degree, but I'm like, man, it doesn't matter. He's able to go cross all boundaries.
When I read Rick, I feel like I'm reading Rick's true opinion, not an analytic that says, if we kind of, go a little bit here, it's going to, you know what I'm talking about, Rick?
I see the guys looking on their computers where they're checking, how the web traffic's reacting to what they've written, and sometimes I wonder whether they tweak the headline or they change some of the stuff they write in the future to sort of exaggerate their views just because it's going to get more traffic. Yeah, I definitely think that goes on. And thank you both for saying that. I've never tried to do that.
I need to save that for when we're actually on. but it's true. I'm very fortunate to have grown up in southern Indiana. Rick was the sports director for the Courier. You talk about luckily, we had Pat Forty at the same time, and then of course now he works with Eric. But Eric always covered other things that I was in, but he's another great one. But man, Louisville's very, very fortunate.
Yeah, 40's one of the best in the country at what he does, and Eric Crawford's just a tremendous, multi-talented journalist. He can take pictures, he can do video, he can write, he can report, and he's right now on a sort of a mission trip in South Africa.
Really?
First vacation he's taken for like in 3 years, and that's what he decided to do. Says a lot about Eric Crawford.
That's amazing.
I took a mission trip to Las Vegas.
Is that where you're at now?
No. I was there for 5 days for the summer league.
Yeah, I saw your pictures.
But that's where, I went to save people. And
all right,
how are
20
you doing,
seconds.
You doing all right?
I'm doing great.
Provide their guests with an exceptional dining experience. With weekly specials, quick, attentive service, Southern Stone Restaurant provides delicious 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. Thanks a lot for joining us here on this Wednesday. Appreciate you very much. JD Campbell with us, the former SID for IU, and now joined by the Hall of Famer Rick Bozich. We were in the break. We were bragging on Rick, so we might as well do it while we're on the air. But I was very fortunate to grow up in Southern Indiana. And when I say Southern Indiana, I mean the real Southern Indiana, down south, not South Central Indiana, which people south of Indianapolis think is Southern Indiana. The people in Indianapolis and north think that Southern Indiana is from Southport to all the way to the bottom, I think. And I'm like, true. Oh, no. I'm like, wait a minute. They're an hour north of me. They're not Southern Indiana, man. But Rick was the sports director at the Courier Journal for 17 years. Is that right?
I was a columnist there from 1986 to 2012. Before that, I was Louisville Times. Yeah,
Louisville Times, and then not only that, then Pat Forty comes along under you as well, and we were so fortunate to have that kind of sports writing there. And I said that Rick is the most unique of both sports columnists because they generally piss people off. There's always people that they
piss people off in my time.
And I know that there's probably UK fans that would get mad if you write something positive about Louisville or what, but it was never that real swing. You're always able to stay right there in the middle, and deservingly so because you're very respected, but that's hard to do, man.
Well, thank you for saying that. I really do appreciate it. I guess all you just do is try and be honest and say how you really feel. And as JD was mentioning off camera, I think there are guys who, in today's world, considering you're judged on your clicks and there's metrics and they keep track of them by the hour and they see where they come from, Facebook, Twitter, this place, that place, Google, that they tailor what they're writing towards what their metrics tell them will draw responses, and they always have to be outraged. I can't be outraged every day. I mean, some of these guys are outraged about something every day. It's like you're both baseball fans. You can't throw a 97-mile-an-hour fastball every day. People don't want that. They don't want to eat steak every day. So, like, someday give your opinion, someday write a feature, someday do more reporting and tell people something they might not know. Mix it up, and that's what I've tried to do through the years. And fortunately, I've had bosses who've allowed me to do that. Now you say haven't made anybody mad. Now that's not true. I've back in the near the end of the Bob Knight era, I made a lot of people mad. Somebody put a dead fish in my mailbox once because I was very critical of Coach Knight. Kentucky fans. Alex repeated it. I told it once. I think it was a advertisement they ran in the Courier Journal is that Kentucky fans thought I liked Louisville. Louisville fans thought I liked Kentucky, and Indiana fans didn't think I liked anybody. So that was an advertising
What
thing.
you do.
But you know,
that's what
I look at some of the, you know, it's a sad state of our industry right now, is that it's the loudest squawkers who get the most attention. You can write that. It gets frustrating at times. You can write what you think is a really good story, well reported, well written, has a theme to it. You pull it all together, and it might not resonate with readers and get a bunch of clicks. And you could write 400 to 500 words of nonsense and just spray some ridiculous opinion, and it'll blow up on the web. And to me, that's JD and I have had these conversations. I mean, that's the sad state of our industry. And I grew up at a time, you know, where I knew who all the great writers were around the country. And when they would come in to town for the Derby, I'd be like awestruck, like, well, that's Red Smith, and that's Blackie Sherrod, and that's Jim Murray, and you know, that's Hubert Meisel and Dave Kindred and David Israel and all these dudes, and just kind of followed a little bit, tried to do what they did. And we don't have that anymore. And we've got a lot of, unfortunately, hot takes people.
Yeah, and you know, the thing about it is, you and I talked. I hate analytics and everything, including baseball.
Right.
You know, but again, that's one of the things I would tell my students. I said, you know, nowadays it is about putting up the numbers because everybody's in a survival mode.
Yeah, they
and the business side of it is very prominent. Whereas you really didn't think about business. When I started reading you, I told you the story. You know, the first year in the profession, 1986, I joined the USBWA, the Basketball Writers of America, and every month we would get Basketball Times, and you were one of the columnists, the people that wrote that I, you know, enjoyed reading. I remember Chuck Mistovich. Do you remember that name?
Oh, yeah.
Tony Jimenez, and
right.
Just a lot of different guys that you would learn from. And
Bob Ryan was in there.
Yeah, and then I got the opportunity to work with you on a daily basis, and it's like, you know, the great thing about our industry is, you know, there's a professional person, and then there's the person. And I always try, especially now that I'm, you know, away from it a little bit. It's just, you know, the person is what is important, and those relationships are what is really, really important. And I know I always appreciated getting a chance to work with you, or taking a picture with Tony La Russa, you know, as we did years ago, and with Tom,
or getting one of was it your shirt or Tim Buckley's shirt? I don't remember. One year I had to borrow a shirt at the last minute from one of you guys, so I think
it was my shirt, because I had extras in the locker room.
Wait a minute.
In my locker room, and I got it.
Time out. Rick Bozich is like 6'5", and no offense, JD, but you're not 6'5". How does that work out?
I was 6'5" wide at some point, so I could let him.
We covered up the sleeves, man.
Yeah,
I think I got a tie from Buckley. I got one from you and one from Buck, and. What happened was I'd gone up to the IU game, and they didn't want to send a cameraman. And then after I was up there, they realized it, because I took some video outside of all the students lined up, and someone at the office found out, hey, that really is a big game. And at the last minute, they sent a cameraman up there, and they said, can you do something on air? And I said, well, you told me you weren't sending anybody on air. I didn't bring a, shirt and tie. Well, can you find one? So I went to Buckley first, I think it was, because Tim Buckley was bigger.
Yeah.
And then JD took care of it for me.
Well, yeah. Now that I remember it, here's how I got it. I had shirts in my closet at work that we had players wear for coat and tie shots, and that's why I was able to get one that fit you. So I won't make any more jokes about me being 6'5" wide, but no, I mean, it's just always. It's interesting because when I first came to IU, the number of newspapers that covered us obviously well outnumbered the blogs and websites. And now it's complete opposite with the consolidation of Gannett buying the Herald Times, the Louisville paper, Evansville, Muncie. And so, I always say to people, go home for Thanksgiving on a Thursday, drive, and then coming back on Sunday, every 12 to 14-year-old has a driver's license. That's what's changed in the media. It's much younger. It's more technologically. They want the technology stuff, and veterans such as yourself who learned from guys like Billy Reed or Dave Kindred or guys like that. There was a different vibe. It was not an agitated group.
Right.
It was just people. And again, quite honestly, people didn't have the access that they have now. Teams didn't have websites. We didn't have Twitter and put out our own content and things like that. So you guys were the conduit to the fans. And, certainly, as we keep moving forward, it's all changed. And by the way, you are one of the questions on my final exam. Name a reporter who went from being at a newspaper now with another entity, newspaper to television. And you and Bob Kravitz would alternate every year when he was with THR.
Well, I was funny you say that, because I was just going to mention how Rick is one of a minority of group that has been able to just continue to morph because of basically what we talked about earlier, his ability to just reach people and say the things and it's just thought-provoking usually, or it's something that makes you think. But Kravitz is another great one. But Rick, obviously, and your partner in crime down there at WDRB.com, Eric, who was on a mission trip. We didn't talk about that, but which is very cool. But WDRB TV in Louisville, kind of unique. We've seen THR did that for a while in Indianapolis, but they never stuck with it. WDRB is one of the few that has really stuck with what you guys are doing, having writers become the reporters.
Yeah, I have to thank our station manager Bill Lamb at the time, and our news director Barry Fulmer, and our current news director Jennifer Keeney. That when they made that move in 2012, it was kind of shocking, and they were committed to it. And I was in a point in my career where if I went there and it didn't work, I don't know what I was going to do, because I couldn't go back to the newspaper. But I had faith in what they were people of their word, and they've backed up all the promises they made and promoted us and given us different platforms to try and succeed. But I've also tried to invest in different ways to stay relevant. I mean, I can talk about when I first started, when I worked for the Daily Student. I remember when I went on a road trip a couple times, Coach Knight let the IDS reporters fly with the team. And I went on.
Tell JD about that trip, the one that we always took. Was it Iowa where you almost didn't make it back?
Left? Yeah. I had to carry a portable typewriter, and I would type out my story on a portable typewriter and then give it to somebody to send it back on a thing called a telecopier, which was sort of a predecessor to a fax machine. That's how George Montgomery got his start. He used to be the telecopier guy at IU. When out-of-town writers would come, he would charge guys $40 or $50 to transmit their stories back to their papers. Ask them about it. And
then you got the Radio Shack computer, right?
Radio Shack computer. But anyway, when I was the story Jim was talking about was I was at Iowa, and it was a Saturday, Monday trip. They played Iowa on Saturday and Minnesota on Monday. And it was a night game, and the Daily Student didn't have a Sunday paper. And so I did my interviews after the game. It was in the old Iowa Fieldhouse, in the SID office. I think it was George Wine was upstairs in the old Iowa Fieldhouse. And I went up there to get final stats. I figured I'd get a few extra copies to give to the players. And I looked out over the balcony, and all the players were still standing down the floor talking to their families and friends. And I stuck my head back into the SID office because they had another Big Ten game on, and it involved a team that was in the race for the Big Ten title. And in 75, you still had to win the league to go to the NCAA tournament. So I thought it was a big deal. So I got distracted and ended up listening to too much of the game. And the second time I stuck my head out, they were all gone. And I was like, I'm some college kid. I had no credit cards. What's happening to me here? So I ran downstairs with all my stuff, and the bus was pulling away in the parking lot in a frigid Iowa City. And as I walked up to it, it like moved up like 20 feet. And I circled around the back of it, and it moved up like 20 more feet. And I walked up to the door and I knocked on it, and Coach Knight sitting in the front seat, and the door opened and he goes, "What the hell happened to you?" And I said, "Coach, I was trying to." He goes, "I don't give a shit what your excuse was. The blankety blank IDS almost got left in Iowa City. Now go sit your ass down." And I felt like I was about this big. And I walked down the middle of the plane, and Buckner and Green and Laskowski and all those dudes, man, they were just roaring because it was fun for them to see somebody else get their butt chewed.
What was it after a win, by the way?
Oh yeah, that was the year they won every game until Scott May broke his arm and they lost to Kentucky in the regional final. It was after a win.
I did that after a loss. It was the year we won the Big Ten in 2016. And we were playing at Michigan State. And we only lost 3 games that year, but Michigan State was one of them. And we were packing up, getting all ready to go. And they said, "Hey, we're going to be delayed about 30 minutes. And so I went somewhere to start doing some work and sending it back. And I got done and I went out and the bus was gone.
Uh-oh.
And so I had to call Jade Grossman on the bus. I said, "Jade, man, I'm back here." So you can imagine Tom's delight to find out that they're almost at the airport. They had to turn around, come back and get me. And after a loss like that, but I didn't get too much grief, but I think we, it's something, with teams that that's why, from that point on, I was like, as soon as I'm done, I'm not sticking around and I'm getting on the bus. That's it. Cause I never wanted to be late, but I did miss the bus at Michigan State after a big loss. Fortunately, we won the conference later that year.
Yeah, my view was 10 minutes early was 5 minutes late.
Oh, had that been a loss there, you probably would not have gotten on that bus, I'm assuming.
With Coach Knight?
Yes.
No. And I had no money. I had no idea what would have happened to me. I mean, that's back in the days before, high school. I mean, college senior didn't have any credit cards. I had no car. I mean, how would have I gotten it? It would have been a disaster.
It's a long walk, baby. It's a long walk.
In January, yeah.
I know you've got to get out, Rick.
No cell phones either. Kentucky plays today at 1:30, actually, on CBS Sports Network. They're up in Canada. They got their first game in this tournament in the Global Challenge. So if you're looking for a college basketball fix, you can finally see DJ Wagner and Reed Shepard and Justin Edwards in this highly ranked recruiting class they have. And I think they play 3 more times this week. So that's going on. JD will be thrilled to know I'm actually heading to Atlanta tomorrow. I'm going for some stupid reason to the first 2 games of the White Sox Braves series, the best team in baseball against the worst.
You're glutton for punishment, man.
Yeah, I am. I haven't seen the Sox all year, and going down with my daughter and her husband and my grandson for a little baseball trip. So should be fun.
You got to tell me how that new stadium is.
Yeah, I've driven past it, haven't been in. I've heard nothing but good things. So
it'd be interesting to see what the Reds do after this All-Star break.
Yeah, I'm going to make a trip and go see the Reds. I want to go see them in person, how they're doing. But let's do this again sometimes, guys.
Appreciate it, Rick. Thank you so much, buddy. We appreciate you. Rick
Bozich, WDRB.com. Cell phone number, JD?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'll text you. Thanks, Jim.
All right. You bet, buddy. Rick Bozich joining us here. We're back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the market, I love JD. I thank you so much for coming on because I just love these conversations. I could do this every day, all day. They're just a blast to hear and hearing guys just be themselves and relax and have fun.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they're all good. I mean, I think, like I get the story for me and Bob Kravitz is Bob Kravitz also had bypass surgery, and he was so helpful to me. And again, that was the thing. When you've never gone through anything like that, you don't know. And I had so many people, Kravitz and Bill Raftery and Cliff Marshall's father-in-law. People coming up to me and said, "Hey, you got this. It'll be the best thing that you'll ever go through." And there's no question. I feel so much better than I ever have. over the last 20, 25 years. You know, I feel like I'm 19 or 20 with the energy that I get now.
I'd rather ask you now than on the air. Was it the stress that?
No, it's genetics. Genetics. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, I'm sure stress played a part of it, and certainly my diet would have played a part of it. But my father had his first heart attack when he was 40 years old.
Oh.
And so genetically, you know, from that time on, I really, you know, I kept dreading, you know, is this going to be the year? Is this going to be the year? Is this going to, you know, you just kind of, you know, deal with it. But genetics, you know, plays probably one of the largest parts in it. Anything else. I have an older sister that's about 73. You know, she has some similar, but not obviously, you know, she was a lawyer. So I'm sure there was a lot of stress with her, but for me, it's just a matter of everything kind of caught up. And it was very, very mild. I mean, there was, you know, I talked to somebody that works at IU and they said, hey, that they were, what was it? That they flatlined and had to get shocked back. And so that's, you know, I didn't have anything. I didn't even, oh, really? I had a heart attack, you know? And they said, yeah, you at least the enzymes or whatever they measure, the troponin or whatever it is, that shows that you did. And so then they did all the
10
testing.
seconds, guys.
Decided I need to get bypassed.
Hops is Brewing, Metalworks Brewing Company. Bring your passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by Campbell. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Wednesday. It's July 12th. Let me make sure I got that right. JD Campbell with us, former SID for IU. We've been talking to a number of different people, having a blast. And if you weren't aware, we were talking in the break. JD had a health scare a while back, but come through that wonderfully and feeling better than you've ever felt in a long time. It sounds like. And our good friend Bob Kravitz, who's on, is very, very similar. But he's backing at it, playing golf, and it's just great to see. Maybe you're in better shape than you were 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was pretty evident with the guys that saw me, because I did go home last summer for a convention, and then this was the first time they've seen me since I had the procedure, and they're like, man, you look really good. And I said to them, man, ask your wife, I always look good. And you know, just kind of, you know, giving each other the business and the humor and stuff like that. But no, you know, I was very fortunate. I have just a wonderful medical, you know, Larry Rink, obviously, you know, and Kyle Hornsby helped me out, and health is not a reason for me to, you know, step away from it. I made a lot of adjustments during the season when I came back. I came back a month early than they thought I was going to come back. So I've learned, you know, I walk every day, and that was one of the fun things about going back home to Las Vegas, was walking there, and the heat does nothing to me there. I'm so used to, again, for whatever reason, it's ingrained in my body that the desert heat absolutely does nothing to me. It almost killed, you know, like I say, people I've been around, they're like, oh my God, it's so hot. But, you know, it was good.
And the funny thing is, I was like, man, it just happened to him. I said, he's at the most peaceful time probably of his career at IU. During the Tom Crean eras, there was success, there was downs, there was just a lot of it was just always something. And then the Archie Miller era, you know, that went through that. And now with Mike Woodson, I'm like going, he is the most laid back dude, and boom, and then this happens to you.
Well, it's just, you know, it's just a situation where, for me, everyone in my family, my wife and my 2 sons, their job status all changed. And what I look at and what my mindset is, okay, what are we going to do in the future? Where do we want to have time to where maybe I work something different than Indiana basketball, which again, Indiana basketball, regardless of what your record is, it's still a top 10 driven media.
It's a story all the time.
Yes, it's all, and even when you're gone, you're not away, and even when you're home, you're not there because
there's no off season.
No. And so it's really just a time for me to sit back and say, okay, what do we want to do? Where do we want to be? And let's see what the next chapter takes us, because I'm not ready just to sit back and say, okay, that's it, I'm done. Not at all in any shape. It's just going to keep my feet wet. I just don't know how deep I'm going to go in the water.
Well, how exciting. It's got to be really exciting for you, because you can write your own ticket as far as doing what you want to do, is the environment you want to put yourself into. And there's so many different branches, because for what JD has done, he has compiled just unbelievable amounts of knowledge and information in regarding to sports. Earlier we talked about all the different people just from the IU family, but that extends so far outside of that, is other jobs that he's had, the people you meet through those jobs. I mean, your reach is unbelievable, but you can write your own ticket as far as what you want to do to be happy and comfortable.
Well, I think the big thing for me is being able to take all the experiences, and I've worked with a number of great coaches, and my job to me is always coach centric, because if you don't have their confidence, it's going to be harder for you to manage what they want and expect out of the program. And I can take that. The other thing is, the number of places that I've been able to go to through the years. There are very few places. There are 2 places I've never been: New Orleans and San Francisco. And even though I grew up out west, never been to New Orleans or San Francisco, but I've been pretty much everywhere else, and experienced events and gotten to see, things. And hopefully someone will, have some value. And the fact that I've been through a number of different experiences. I often say PR stands for protect reputation, and that's what I believe is you're always protecting the reputation of whoever you're serving at that time. And I certainly did with Indiana, and having the guys prepared, because I tell you what, I do believe this: it's easier to do media as a player in the NBA than it is at Indiana, because there are so many different wide ranges of people with wide range of interest, covering colleges like Indiana, Kentucky, Louisville, North Carolina, Kansas, things like that. Whereas in the NBA, you'll be lucky to have 2 or 3 beat writers and a columnist covering your city. And the nice thing the thing that I was sitting back and watching at the Summer League was, I love the way that they handled media and the coaches and the players. Like, it's part of their contract. They know when and what they have to do, how they have to do it. You're not going, coaches try to get it done as quickly as possible. And that's one thing that Mike did. Mike was used to the NBA. And so, he, hey, let's get this done. Let's go. And, the players, learning, when you see guys go from when they come in as freshmen to being a veteran, a junior and a senior. I think of Race Thompson and how much he improved. And even a couple of weeks ago, Charlie had Malik Renew on, and you could see, the difference between the freshman and sophomore year. And that's what you want. You want them prepared for the next level. You don't want, dealing with the media to be a problem for anybody. And really dealing with the media is a practice for a job interview. To me, I think the more you do it, the more you get comfortable. And, my role is try to prepare them for what they can expect to be asked, not only the coaches, but the players especially, because you don't want them to get caught off guard. And so my job is a lot of anticipation. What do I think is going to be, hot button points after a game? And so when I'm walking with them or pulling them aside, hey, you're probably going to get asked about this. And we also have different rules. Always never say anything negative about the opposing team. Always praise your staff. Hey, Coach Buckley had a great scout for us today. He had us prepared. Look at praising one teammate every time. So if Malik was going up there, hey, Caleb, I thought Caleb gave us some great production off the bench. So we'd have absolutes that I would try to do and just not let them go in blind. I mean, it's a small thing, but over the course of years, I say one of the proudest things that I can say about my 16 years is I don't think you could ever say that anything that was ever commented after a post game ever became a big major story from our players. And again, some people may think that's boring. Jordan Hulse was the best at being boring. We tease him all the time about it, but that's what you have to do because, again, you're protecting reputation.
Speaking of Jordan, he'll be on with us Friday. John, if you've got that flyer to put up, coming up a week from tomorrow, the Never Lose Hoop golf outing, which supports the Halls Foundation, which in turn supports area children with cancer and their families. So come out, play in that event. It's going to be a blast at the golf club at Eagle Point Studios, or at the golf club at Eagle Point, rather, as it's always held there. But that is next July 20th, Thursday. And as you can see, you can just go to events.golfstatus.com and just hit Never Lose Hoop in the search bar, and that will pull up. You can sign up for individual, sign up for a team, or become a sponsor. But it's going to be a great event, and it's definitely a great cause. So make sure if you can, come on out and join us out there. We had a great turnout last year, and lots more this year. We've got 3 hole-in-one contests, a $10,000 hole-in-one contest, and 2 different $5,000 hole-in-one contests. So looking forward to that coming out there. But, yeah, Jordan will be out there as well as several others, so we're looking forward to that. Just talked to Jordan yesterday. He'll be on with us Friday, like I said. They just finished up camps, I believe.
Yeah, I think yesterday was the last day of their individual camps, and that's all part of what you do in the summer. I would guess that back in the day when Bob Knight had his camp, I can't speak to what they had, but camps are very different. Camps back then were spend the night. You had a lot of people throughout basketball, high school basketball coaches, aspiring college coaches. They would work those camps and have to be responsible for kids in dorms, sneaking out late at night or doing whatever they do. So it's certainly a different atmosphere than it was many, many, many years ago. But yeah, camps were always such an important part of the summer and a chance for guys to make some money too.
Yeah, I know we're bumping up toward the end here, but in your job, you did deal with all the reporters, people like me, and keeping us in some lines, because we're not always the best at coloring in the lines. Don't always intend to go outside, but sometimes we do. And but you did a tremendous job. Thank you so much for your patience with me and helping me become and do what I do, but to make it better, because it does make it better. Because you need, I don't care who you are, you need some guidance. You don't know everything, and so great learning. But I appreciate so much all of your patience and getting the opportunity to work with you.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for saying that. I think one of the things that when I had to come in and assess, what I was going to be dealing with Indiana media, when you have a lot of different entities, there's a competitiveness to it. And the difference now, as opposed to 16 years ago, was the fact that a lot of these are now people are self-employed and it's their own deal. Whereas, you would work for a radio station or whatever, they took all the risk. You deal with a lot of people who own their things, and you got to be cognizant of that, and you got to be, understand that, hey, you want people to be successful, because if they're successful, I think IU's successful.
Absolutely. And man, we love having you on anytime you're available. Every time you're on, it makes it just a blast.
Oh, it seems like he must have accidentally dropped out. But JD, thanks for joining us. We do got to wrap things up. We appreciate you. I know that's what Jim was getting at, and he's very grateful to have you. We're all grateful to have you. I know the listeners are glad to be able to hear all the insight you were able to provide for us from your perspective on things and just the way that you see Indiana basketball and Indiana athletics in general. So I'm very thankful for you. Thankful for all you listeners out there as well. We'll be back with you tomorrow. This has been Indiana Sports Beat Radio, and we will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports